Hello friends, thank you for watching this video. I am Mohamad and today we're going to be exploring how we can build our web API with TDD. We're going to be exploring test-driven development. We're going to be discussing the methodology that we need to follow. As well, we're going to be going through step by step by creating every single component inside our web API and then creating the test for it. We're going to be starting by creating our controller and testing them. Then we're going to be going through creating the services and testing them and our HTTP request. We're going to be going every single detail in order for us to have our web API built on TDD. If you like this video, please like, share and subscribe. It will really help the channel. As well, if you'd like to support me, please consider supporting me on Patreon or buy me a coffee. With that said, grab your cup of coffee and let's get started. So what we're going to be doing is, first of all, we're going to be getting our solution, then adding our API, then we're going to be adding our test libraries. Once we have done that, we're going to be start developing our controllers inside our API and then creating the tests for them. And vice versa, we're going to be doing those step by step in order for us to achieve our test-driven development. So let's get started. So in this diagram here, we can see basically this is a solution that we're going to be building. We're going to be calling it Formula 1. And then we're going to have an API here, which we're going to allow us to interact with our application. And then we're going to be creating the test for our API. And as we can see here, we have a dependencies for the test to run on our API. So we need to link these two together. So now let's go to our terminal. So we're going to start by creating our solution. So it's going to put .NET new SLN-O, and I'm going to call this Formula app. I'm going to navigate to it, and now I'm going to create my API. So .NET new web API -n Formula app.api. Now I want to create my unit test. So .NET new xUnit. So there's multiple types of unit tests that I can create, but for the sake of this video, we're going to be utilizing xUnit. So xUnit -n Formula app.test.unit tests. Perfect. And now if I put ls, we can see I have my SLN, my API, and my unit test. And basically right now what I want to do is I want to link everything to my solution. So when I open my solution, everything will open directly. So I'm going to put .NET SLN add */***/*.csproj. And basically here what I'm doing is I'm wildcard adding everything to this solution. And we can see here both has been added to my current SLN. Perfect. And the last thing actually that I would like to do is I want to add a reference from my applications, from my unit test, from my API to my unit test. And that we can do very easily. I'm going to put .NET add Formula app.unit test Formula app.unit test.csproj. And then I can add here reference. I can put Formula app.api, Formula app.api.csproj. Okay, perfect. So now that this has been added, now let's open this up in Rider. And as we can see here in Rider, I already have my API up and running. I have my unit test up and running. We're going to be changing all of these, so we don't really need to worry about it. And if I go here to my references, so I can see here edit, and I can see edit csproj. We can see here that my application is referring to the Formula 1 API, which is exactly what we want in order for us to basically be able to test every single component that we have there. Great. So before we get started, I'm just going to do some cleaning up here. So I don't really need this class, so I'm just going to delete this. Delete. I'm going to delete the weather forecast controller as well. And I'm going to be deleting unit test 1 here. We don't really need it. Okay, perfect. So now that we have did some cleaning up, the next step that I want to do is I want to start creating my own controller. And the controller that we're going to be building today is a way where we can actually see all of the fans inside our application after they have registered. So I'm going to create here a new controller, and I'm going to call this controller fans controller. And this is going to be a pretty simple controller. We're going to just directly inherit from the controller base. and we're gonna basically have the same structure. So here we're gonna have to say it's an API controller, and we're gonna specify the route for it, and this is gonna be controller. And inside of this, I'm gonna have very simply an action which is gonna get us all of the fans. We're gonna leave it empty for now, and then we're gonna be building it up. So to do this, I'm just gonna put HTTP get, and we're gonna call it the name get fans. And here I'm just gonna put public async task action result, and it's going to be get. All we're going to be doing here is return okay with any message for now. We can say working or funds, anything we want. So now this is a very, very simple controller that we have created. So just to test it out, I'm going to be running it now. So let's run it. So inside my web browser, I'm just going to use it here. And if I go here, we can see try it out, execute, and I got fans. Perfect. So now that I know my API is running and basically I'm able to see the data that I need to, I can start now taking to the next step, which is actually start creating my tests. So let me close this. Before we actually start developing our tests, I'm gonna add some packages to my unit test. So inside here, I'm gonna navigate to my formula unit tests. And inside my formula unit test, I need to install some packages. So I'm gonna put dotnet add package, and I'm utilize the mock package. And this package will allow me to actually mock my services rather than me trying to initiate them. So this will allow me to utilize services within my DI container in order for me to utilize them. And now that mock has been installed, the other one is gonna utilize is fluent assertion. So we're gonna put, let's clear this up, clear .NET add package, and we're gonna put, it's gonna be fluent assertion. Perfect. Now to make sure they are installed successfully, let's go here to edit CS proj. We can see fluent assertions is here and we have mock is here. Perfect. So once that has been done, the next step what we need to do is we need to actually create a folder structure within our unit test, because it's always good to organize our test. We're going to be creating different folders. For example, for reusable components, we're going to be creating some mocking libraries and mocking functionalities that we can utilize across different tests. So having a structured approach within our unit test will allow us to basically accelerate our testing rather than writing every single time everything. Writing this inside or structuring it inside our unit test will facilitate our life basically on the long run. So let's see what we need to do here. So let me close this. So the first thing I'm gonna be doing here is I'm gonna add a new directory. I'm gonna call this helpers. So this is all the helpers we're gonna go. Then I'm gonna get another directory. I'm gonna create called systems. And basically inside systems here, I'm gonna define the two different type of tests that I'm gonna be doing. So the first one is gonna be for the controllers. The other one's gonna be for all of the services that I create. So I'm gonna put here controllers, and I'm gonna create another one here, which is gonna be called services. And the last folder that I'm gonna be creating, which is gonna be called fixtures. And within the fixtures folder is gonna contain all of the default data that I'm gonna be reutilizing rather for me to creating every single time inside the tests. So now that I have a bit of a solid structure on what needs to be done within my test, now let's start by actually creating our tests. So the first thing that I wanna be doing here is inside my controllers, inside my systems here, I'm gonna be getting a new class, and I'm gonna call this test fans controller. And inside this class, I'm gonna start creating unit tests for my fans controller. So if we take a look at this fans controller, let's see what we can test here. Because it's a very simple controller at the moment, I only have one action, which is this. So the first thing that I can do is I can first check if actually this is working by actually returning an action result, so we can make sure that it's actually not throwing any error. Then what we can do is we can actually test if we are returning an OK, which is make sure that we're returning an HTTP status code of 200. So this is returning a HTTP status code of 200. And now that I take a look at this, maybe later on I want to actually check the results, which is going to be returning as well, other than the HTTP status code. So let's take this step by step and see how we can actually build up these tests. So the first thing that I need to do here is I need to specify a fact. And a fact here, basically I'm telling my unit test that this is going to be one of the tests that's going to be running. So it will actually give me this green triangle here, which allow me to run these tests, and basically this will let my application know that this is one of the unit tests that needs to run. So once I do this, then I'm going to put public async, and then I'm going to put task. I'm going to give here now the name of my test, so it has to be get on success returns status code 200. So this is going to be the first test that I'm going to be doing, which is basically I'm going to validate that I'm going to be getting a 200 status code. And this is going to be the structure that I'm going to be utilizing to name my test, because inside my current action, it's an HTTP get. So I specify the get, and then I specify the condition. In case it's a successful condition, I need to return a 200. I can do another test in case it's not successful. I can get, for example, a 404. I can get a 500, depending on why it wasn't a success. So, and inside every single test, I need to follow the three structure, which is going to be arrange, act, and assert. So what does this mean? What does arrange mean, act mean, and assert mean? Arrange mean here is basically I'm setting up my test. What does my test need to use in order for it to run? So it needs a reference for my controller. It might need some additional data. So all of this, basically I'm setting up my test. I'm setting up all of the requirement and the dependency that my test needs to use in order for it to run. Then inside my act, I'm actually executing that action inside my controller. And then basically I'm getting a result. And inside the assert, I'm getting whatever result that I'm getting back from my act, and I'm actually making sure that it is the results that I need. So these are the main three steps inside my test that I need to follow in order to make sure that my application is running as it should be. And it's actually, the test is actually running as it should be. So let's start with arrange. So within the arrange here, if we take a look at this simple controller right now, we can see that I can directly initiate it because I don't have any dependency injection. I don't have anything which is basically holding me back from running this, because you can see there is nothing inside the constructor to be initialized. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to put var, I'm going to put fans controller equal new fans controller, and then basically I'm going to get here the results. I'm going to put var result equal await fans controller.get. But basically, if I take a look right now here, it's basically giving me a iAction result as a nullable, and this is the first one, which is basically true, which is if we take a look back at my controller, we can see it's returning an iAction result, but this will not give me the result that I want in order for me to check if it's a HTTP status code. What I need to do is I need to cast this iAction result into the OK in order for me to get the status code. So in order for me to do that, all I need to do here is I'm going to put parentheses and I'm going to put the OK object result. And now once I have done that, basically I converted here my iAction result into the OK object result, and then I can put result dot status code, and this is what we want to assert dot should, and here we can see we can utilize the fluid assertion, and I'm gonna put b 200, and this is going to be the first test that we currently have. Again, we're doing a get because this is the get endpoint here that we're going to be having. And then we named it on success. It means everything is working, returns a status code of 200, which should be the case. So now if I click on the play button here, I click on run, it's going to start executing. And as you can see here that I got success, which means that my application has been running successfully and my controller is passing. So congratulations, now this is your first unit test has been written for your controller, which is great. Now this is all great and this is all fun, but as we can see right now that Our fans controller is basically not doing anything. It does not have any types of data that it needs to return. It's basically empty. We're just returning a simple string, which is not what we need. What we need is actually return some fans back. And in order for us to do that, we need some kind of a data model in order for us to mimic a fans. So usually what we do is inside our class library, we create our models, we create our DB context, and then we connect everything together with our API. We're not going to be delving into that. We're going to be creating a fake in-memory database, and we're going to be utilizing that in order for us to return the stuff. But we're going to follow the services approach, where we're going to have services, which is going to be much more easier for you to switch actually the in-memory database to something that you can actually utilize with a real-life database. So inside my application here, I'm going to create a new directory. I'm going to call this models, and inside my models here, I'm going to create a new class, and I'm going to call this fan. So because we're going to representing the fans, and this fan class is going to be pretty straightforward. It's going to have a string, and it's going to be the ID. Actually, it's going to be an int with the ID of the user, which is going to represent the primary key. And then we're going to have a string. We're going to put, it's going to be the name of our fan, and we're going to make it equal string.empty. And lastly, we're going to have the email. Pretty straightforward. It's not really complicated. So here we can see that we have our model, and this is going to be basically our database table that we want to actually utilize. And then what we want to do here is I'm going to create another directory called services. And this services here is going to allow me to create the services that are going to allow me to interact with my DB context. So because I want to utilize dependency injection, because dependency injection makes unit test much more easier, I'm going to create an interface folder, interfaces. And inside my interfaces folder, I'm going to be creating the interface for my fans service, and then I'm going to be creating the implementation. So here, all I need to do is create a new class or an interface. I'm going to call this fan service. And I'm going to here, inside my service, I'm going to create a class, call it fan service. And all I'm going to do here is implement the ifan service that I have. Perfect. Now it's pretty straightforward. Both of them are empty. Both of them don't really do anything. The next step is I want to basically inject these inside my program.cs. So what I'm going to do here is, before the app gets built, I'm going to put builder.services.add scoped, and here I'm going to add the ifan service and the fan service. Perfect. So now basically inside my DI container, I can directly inject my ifan service, so I can actually utilize them inside my fan controllers. Perfect. So now that this is done, what I want to do inside my ifan service, I want to create the first method that I need to actually build, and this is going to be task. It's going to return a list of fans, and I'm going to call it get all fans. Let's fix those references here. Perfect. And now we can see that this is complaining because I did not implement it. So let's implement it now. And we can see here currently I have the implementation for it. And if I try to execute it, it will throw not implemented. But that's fine for now. This is what we want. We want to test the utilization first before we can actually start test the implementation. So before we move any further, let us think about this ifan service that we have. We could need to connect to a third-party service where we're actually extracting data, like a third-party API, if we're building a microservices. So this, for example, can connect to a different microservice to pull out our information. So what we're going to be doing here is we're trying to mimic this. Let us update our diagram with this, and then we can see actually how we can implement a GET request here, a fake GET request, and another nevertheless, and then we can see how we can actually implement this unit test for it. So if I go back to my drawing here, what I want to do here inside my API, I'm going to have, let's make this a bit bigger. I'm going to have a service, and this service here is going to be called the fan service. And the fan service is going to basically rely on a third-party API. Let's give it a different color. And let's give it a different color. So this fan service here It's going to rely on a third-party API, which is going to be, for example, a different microservice that we can do. So let's make this a bit bigger. And this is going to be another microservice that we're going to have. Let's give it the green color. And this microservice, basically, it's going to be the fan storage, or basically the fan processing service API. So what we need to do is, for example, this fan service, it will connect to this API endpoint, for example, in order for us to get the data that we need, so our web API will process it. So here we can see that it's not only going to be limited to a single service that we're going to be testing, we're going to be testing this HTTP request that's going to be going to those services and getting back the information. So once we have actually understood what we're going to be building, so this leads us that inside our fan service, we need to utilize some kind of an HTTP request in order for us to connect to this API. So in order for us to utilize this, what I need to do here is inside my fan service, I need to first of all have a constructor, and I need to utilize the HTTP client. So private read only HTTP client, and I'm gonna put here HTTP client, and then I'm gonna initialize this. So here initialize through constructor, and now we can see that I have my HTTP client available. And here this will allow me to utilize my HTTP client inside my method here, but it's not something that I want to do right now. I just wanted to set this up from here, and then I'm gonna go back to my program.cs and I'm gonna initialize it from there. Inside my program.cs, I'm gonna put builder dot services dot add HTTP client, and I need to specify for which service, which can be the ifan service and the fan service. Perfect. So now that I have done this and I know basically everything is running, what I'm gonna do right now, I'm gonna go to my fans controller and I'm gonna inject my ifan service in here. So I'm gonna put again private read only ifan service fan service, and then I'm gonna have here a constructor, and I'm gonna initialize this through the constructor. Perfect. Again, this is all happy, but now we can see that I'm having a problem. Why? Because here inside my controller base at the beginning, I did not have any dependency inside my fans controller. I had a controller which has been initialized with an empty constructor. And because let me remove this for now. So once I remove this, we can see here that this is back in action, because basically I don't have anything inside my constructor for my controller, and that's why it was happy. But now, because I have to initialize my fan service through this, it means that my test will not work anymore, because I need to cater for the ifan service here. And this is what we're going to be doing right now. I'm going to update this test for it to work, because right now if I try to run this, it will not work. It will basically give me an error, because basically it's telling me that the ifan service, it needs to have an initializer for my service before it actually can run. So let's see how we can fix this. The main library that we're going to be utilizing in order for me to fix this is going to be the mock library. And the mock library is going to allow me to actually mock the service that I have created and inject it directly into my constructor. So it will try to mimic a dependency injection mechanism inside my test in order for me to make my test runs. And that's the power of mock. Mock basically allow me to do a lot of stuff within the dependency injection, and that's why interfaces really matters, because I can mimic a behavior that I need rather than trying to recreate everything directly. So let us see how we can use mock here. So I'm gonna create a new variable. I'm gonna put var mock fan service equal to new mock, and it's gonna be the ifan service here. Let us fix those references here. Okay, perfect. Now it's showing. So now that I have my mock fan service, then I'm gonna actually initialize it. So I'm gonna put mock fan service dot setup, and basically here I want to basically tell it what to expect. So now that I have a service that I want to mock, I want to tell it, for example, for this request, give me this. For this information, give me that, etc., etc. So let's see how we can do this. So inside my setup here, I'm gonna put as for services. and then I'm gonna initialize it. So I'm gonna put services dot get all plans, and I'm gonna put return async new list of fans. Let's fix this. And this is, let's see why it's not, set up without the S. Okay, perfect. So here we can see dot get all fans, and we can see here returns async, we forgot the S. Okay, so basically what I did here is I declared a new service that I want to mock, which is the ifan service. And then I'm setting it up saying that when I call the get all fans service, return for me a list of fans. And here we can see we're returning an empty list, which is completely fine for now. And now that I have this, I want to utilize this mock service inside my controller. So to do this, all I need to do here is put mock service.object, and this will allow me to actually directly inject the service here. So now if I run this, we can see it ran again and I got a 200. Now that I have fixed my tests, and we can see here that this is basically running, and now that I have inside my controller, I was able to inject it. Let's build on this a bit. So now that I have my fan service, let us add this here. So I'm gonna put var fans equal await underscore fan service to get all fans, and I'm gonna return this list of fans here. So now basically what we're doing is we're actually returning a list of something that's currently running. And basically currently what I want to do is this method, when I initiate it, is going to create problems, because basically if we go through the implementation, we can see it throws a non-implemented exception, which is fine. What I want to do right now is I want to test this here rather than trying to initiate this. So what I mean by this is I want to test that this method returns some kind of fans list, and I want to initialize, or actually I want to test the result of this method rather than the method itself. I know this could be a bit complicated, but we're taking it here step by step. So because I did in the test, I don't really initiate my methods. I basically, in this case, I don't initiate the get all fans. I just check whatever currently exists inside my action and check the results, and I try to mimic those inside my tests. And what I want to do right now is I want to mimic that the fan service get all fans will actually return a list of fans. I want to test this out. So let's see how we can do this. So going back to the test fans controller, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another fact. So this is going to be another test that I want to run. Then I'm going to put public async task. Then I'm going to put get underscore on success underscore invoke service, which means that I wanted to be able to invoke the fan service that I currently have. And instead of rewriting all of this, I'm just going to copy this here. I'm going to paste it here. That's our arrange. Then I'm going to have my act, and then I'm going to have my assert. So let's do the act now, and the act is going to be almost similar to what we have done before. I'm just going to take this and put it here, and now the result is going to be different. So the result here, we're going to be make sure that the result is not going to be on the HTTP status code rather than on the body of the requests. So I'm going to put mock fan service dot verify. I'm going to put service equal service dot get all fans, and here we're gonna excuse me, we're gonna put times once, which means that whenever we execute this get endpoint, which is gonna be the get all fans, we're gonna execute the service at least once, and basically this will allow us to test it out if actually it's being called or not. So now let's run this by itself. So I can click here on the green button and run. And we can see we got a green tick. And if I want to run everything together, I can just go back on the top of it, top of my class, click run. It will run all of the test all over again. And we can see here that I got a green tick again. Perfect. Let's write one more test here as well. And now we're gonna check if this actually returned a list rather than just, so we're gonna check the output of this. So we're gonna put here fact, again, public, async, task, get, on success, list, or we can say return list of funds. Return, we've got the R. I'm gonna copy this because we're gonna have the same thing, and here we're basically gonna utilize the results that we currently have. And yeah, let's see how we can do this. So I'm gonna put the assert, and we're gonna put result dot should be of type, and then here it's gonna be of type okay object result. So that's the first thing. And then I'm gonna put var, actually we're gonna put object, I'm gonna put result dot value dot should be of type list of fun. Okay, so what I'm doing here is, first of all, I am verifying that this result type, although I have casted it here, I'm verifying that it's of this type. So in case for any reason this cast has failed, this test will fail here as well. And the second thing that I'm doing is I'm checking that the value of this result, which is going to be what exists inside the result. So the OK result will give us HTTP 200 with a body. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to the body of the result. I'm telling that the body should be a list of funds. So now let's try this as well. I can click here, run. We can see here I got a success. And if I go here, for example, run it all of them again, everything is passing. Now to test this out, what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna change this back to a string. And I'm gonna run these tests again to see if it's still gonna break. Run all. Perfect. We can see here that the return list of fan, which is this one, although it's actually returning, let's see the error. Expected to be a collection, but we got a string at the end. So that's going to be the main error here, because basically we changed it and basically it failed this test here because we said it needs to be a list of fans, rather it was a string. Now if I go back to my controller and change it back to a list and I run this test again, we can see it passed now because I fixed the error. And this is exactly what it should be. So now that I have done this, let's add a bit more tests to it. So what happened right now here, let's go back to the fans controller. So now here, basically what we're doing is whenever we have any types of result, we're returning OK. What we want to do is, what happens if this fans controller does not contain any users, an empty list of users? How can we actually return this here? Because we don't really want to return an OK for an empty list of users. What we can do here, we can put if fans.any will return an OK, else will return a not found, because we don't have anything. Although it should not be the case, but just so we can actually test these simple scenarios of how we can actually test different types of outcome, different types of HTTP responses. So now if I go back to my fan service, to my fan test, let us try to test for this. So again, I'm gonna put fact, public, async, task. I'm gonna put get, on, success, return, actually on no fans, return not found. And I'm gonna follow the same structure. I'm just gonna copy this. Perfect. And I'm gonna do the act now. It's gonna be also the same thing. Let's copy this. And now all I'm gonna do inside my assert, I'm gonna put result dot should dot be of type, and here I need to make sure it's not found. And let's test this out. And we can see we got an error because basically we're expecting an OK, and this is not the one. This should be not found. Let's try this again. It passed, but now if we try to run this all over, we're gonna have different errors. Why? Because here basically what we're doing is we're return an empty list of funds. And basically what we're telling this outcome is we're going to be returning a empty list, and once we return an empty list and we try to execute this, we're directly returning not found rather than OK. So in order for me to fix this, I can do the following. So instead of returning an empty list, I can put a new fan, for example. I can put the email Mohamad@test.com. I can put an ID of 1. I can put the name is Mohamad. And I'm gonna copy this for the rest of the other tests, because basically now I want to actually return some kind of data rather than returning an empty list of strings. So I can just copy this here. Oops. Let's just copy this again. Let's paste this here. And let us put this here. And for this one, where we're returning an empty list, we're gonna keep it the same thing. So now if I try to run all of these tests again, we can see that all of the tests have run successfully and I got all green tick. Because basically what I have done here is when I have an empty list, I'm getting a not found. But when I don't have an empty list, which is we have a list of a fan here, I'm getting an OK result and I'm testing it out. So here we can see basically how I can actually manipulate the test in order for it to actually fit within my needs of testing the different scenario that my action or my service can return back to me. This will lead us into another point, which is basically gonna be, instead of having all of these types of data that's gonna be here hard-coded to every single one of these tests, it makes sense for me to abstract it into its own unique class and reutilize it based on my need. And this is what I'm gonna do here. I'm gonna basically create a new class inside my fixtures, and this class is gonna be called fans fixtures. And this is gonna be a pretty forward and simple class. It's only gonna contain the data, a sample data similar to what I have here. So I'm gonna copy this, exactly this one. I'm gonna go here and I'm gonna update this. So I'm gonna put public static. I'm gonna paste this here. And first of all, I'm gonna import reference. I'm gonna remove the new keyword and I'm gonna make this like this. Perfect. So now what I'm doing here is basically I'm creating a method called getFans, which is gonna return for me a list of fans. So now I have one. I'm just gonna create another one, and I'm gonna call this other fan, let's say Donald, and here it's gonna be Donald with the ID 2. So now if I come here, instead of hard coding all of this here, what I can do, I can just delete this. I can utilize my fan fixtures, so fans fixtures dot get fans, and now basically I have a much more cleaner test. Rather than try to hard code all of these different values here, I can directly just call my fixtures and have everything there. Perfect. That's exactly what I need. So now let's run everything again just to make sure that they are running. And we can see everything is passing. Perfect. So now we're going to go to the next step in terms of our testing. And what we're going to be doing here is, as we can see within this diagram, our API currently has a dependency on a third-party service or other service that we have created that we're going to be utilizing to get the information from for our fans. And the way these two connect is basically through HTTP requests. So what we need to do here is, inside our application, we need to build some kind of a HTTP service where we should actually able to connect one service to another. We're not going to be building this final process service API. We're just going to mimic one and pretend that there's one there that we're going to be utilizing. And once we have built that, what we need to do next is we need to actually build a mock service for our testing in order for us to try to mimic all of these random HTTP calls that we're going to be doing. Not random, but basically all of the HTTP calls that we're going to be doing in order for us to make sure that we are covering all of the different ranges that we need. So if we go back to Rider now, the first thing that we're going to be doing is, inside my app settings, I'm going to be creating a new section for my service. I'm going to call this, let's say, application, or let's call it API service. And inside this, I'm going to have a URL. And this URL, I'm going to leave it empty for now. So once we have this here, inside my root directory, I'm going to create a new directory, and I'm going to call it configuration. And inside this configuration, I'm going to create a new class. I'm going to call it API service. And here we're going to have pretty straightforward the URL. Okay, perfect. Now let's go to our services and start updating it in order for us to make utilizing, so we can utilize this endpoint here and start building our connection to our third-party service. We're not going to be building it all, we're just trying to mimic this. So here we have an HTTP client. The next one we're going to be adding is our options. So in order for us to be able to read the configuration inside our app settings, and for that we're going to put a private read-only API service underscore config. Let's name it API service config. I think that's a better name for it. So let's add the reference, and I'm gonna rename this, refactor this, rename to API service config. I think that's a better name. And next, yeah, I think that's a better name. And we can see here it has updated. Perfect. Now let's inject this into, actually let's utilize the constructor initialization to initialize this. And we're going to be utilizing here the I options. And we're going to put here that it's going to be of API service config. And we're going to call it config. And then here we're going to put underscore config equal config.value. Perfect. So now basically with this is not the full setup that we need for our API service config. We still need to do some work inside our program.cs, but this is all we need currently to do inside our fan service. So once we have done that, now let us try to build our get all fan service. So now there is no implementation, so let's try to build it first. So first of all, we're going to mimic a get request. So we're going to put var response equal await underscore HTTP client dot get async, and here we're going to be relying on the underscore config dot URL in order for us to call that URL in order for us to get the response. So we're basically loading the endpoint that we have inside our app settings in order for us to do the get request. Again, this is not an ideal scenario, but this is all for testing purposes. And here what we're going to be doing, we're going to be saying if response dot status code equal HTTP status code of let's say if it's not found, because that's what we were working with before. If it is HTTP status code dot not found, then we're going to be saying returning an empty list of fans. Again, if it's not found, you might throw an error, you might raise an exception, you might throw null, return null. there is a lot of different scenario. For simplicity's sake, we're returning here a not found, an empty list. If, for example, you can say if response.status code equal HTTP status code dot where was it? Dot bad request, which is going to be a 400, or for example, if you want to say, where is it? Let me find it here quickly. Unauthorized, for example, for any types of authorization, you might return here a null. For example, if all of that and if everything is passing, so what you can do here is you can just put var fans equal await response dot content dot read from JSON async. And basically what you're trying to do here is we're trying to convert this into a JSON object, and here we're gonna put list of fan, and then we're gonna return this list, return fans. Again, this can be any different types of implementation that we need. We can have it a switch statement, as you can see here, default implementation. There's a lot. If we want to make this null, we need to update this to be a nullable object, so we need to update the interface as well. And basically we can see here that this will actually allow us to execute this. And basically there's a lot of different ways that we can actually utilize it, but basically as you can see, based on the HTTP status code, you can actually handle this in so many different ways. For now, we're going to be basically focusing on the not found and the default scenario, but as you can see, you can actually update it to make it work however you want. So now that this is actually working, now what we want to do is we want to go to our program.cs, and we want to add basically the configuration for our app settings here in order for us to be able to read it directly through the class. And this is going to be a bit straightforward. So what we can do here, if we go to our first two app setting, let's put an example URL. So HTTPS, you can put my website .com /API /v1 / for example fans. So this could be my endpoint here, and if I go here to program.cs, it's gonna be, let's do it underneath here. You put builder.services.configure, .configure, and then here I want to say I can configure my API service config, and then I can basically do builder.configuration.get section. And the section that I want here is going to be the section here, which is going to be API service. Let's name it API service config for consistency. And then I'm going to come here, add it here. And now basically this will allow me to inject this section inside my DI container, which will going to allow me to access it inside my fan service. Perfect. So now that I have done this, the next step is I want to try to, first of all, mimic the HTTP client that I currently have here inside my test, because basically I don't want to do a HTTP client calls whenever I'm doing unit testing. I might run the unit testing thousands and thousands of times, and if I'm actually doing those API calls, this might affect the data there, so the data integrity is in jeopardy. If I have any limits on the call, basically I utilize them, I utilize all of them. So we can see here the reasoning why might I want to not call these API service, and I want to try to mimic these services. And for that, let us try to build this service mimicking inside my unit tests. So inside my unit test here, inside my helpers folder, I'm going to create a new class, and this class I'm going to call it mock HTTP handler. Perfect. And this mock HTTP handler is going to basically have two methods, one for the success and one for the not found. And this is basically the two reasons that we're currently here handling. We're not going to do the unauthorized one. You can do it if you need to, but for simplicity's sake, we're just going to handle right now the not found and the actual successful one here. So let's start with the success one. So in order for us to start with the success, we can do internal because yeah, we can make it internal. We're not going to access from the outside. Static mock HTTP message handler, because that's going to be the response that we want to send back. And we're going to set up a GET request. And here we're going to say it's going to take a list of T. Basically, we want to make it as generic as possible. And it's going to be the response that we're going to be expecting to send back. So let us fix those references here. And let's make this also generic by making it of type T. Okay, perfect. So now that I have this, the next thing that I need to do is I need to start to creating a mock message, mock response. So var mock response equal new HTTP response message, and we're gonna type that's gonna be of the HTTP status code OK. So where is the OK one here? Okay, this is it. So we're gonna say that the HTTP response message that we're gonna be getting back is gonna be of type OK, and then here we're gonna specify the content that we want to return with it, and we're gonna say new string content equal JSON convert, and we're gonna basically serialize the object, and we're gonna pass the response, basically the list of anonymous objects that we are sending here. And this is gonna be the response message that we have. And then what I wanna do is I'm gonna put mock response dot content dot headers dot content type, and basically here I want to specify what type of content I'm returning, and this is going to be my application JSON. I'm going to put equal new, actually let's make it on a new line so it will fit, new media type header type value, and then here I'm going to, so it's going to be application /JSON. And then once I have done that, I'm going to put a mock handler, and this will allow me basically to set up a new HTTP message mock handler, because this is what we're going to be sending back. And I'll do equal new mock HTTP message handler, and then from here I can put mock handler dot protected. So here, as you can see, I'm using the mock library, and then I'm setting it up, and then I'm going to say that it's going to return a task, which is going to be an async response, and then it's going to be of type HTTP response message, and this is the message that we have set it up previously. And then here I'm going to specify the parameters for it. So the method name is always going to be send async, and I can specify here the it expression, and I'm gonna say is any HTTP request message, and then I'm gonna say my it expression again for any cancellation token dot is any. Then I'm gonna specify my cancellation token, and lastly I'm gonna return the async. Actually, let's fix this here and put dot return async, and I'm going to specify the mock response that I have created previously, and finally I'm going to return the mock handler. So here, this is a very simple implementation of our HTTP response. So what we're doing here is, first of all, we're creating the mock response that we currently have, and this mock response, as you can see, is just returning a HTTP object of 200, which is an OK, and then we're serializing whatever response that we want from here into our content. Then we're specifying the type of this content, and here in this case it's going to be the application /JSON, and then because we're returning here an HTTP message handler, we want to actually set up a new message handler, and this in this case it is the mock handler here, and then we made it as protected because we're utilizing the mock library. We're then doing the setup. Inside the setup, I'm specifying what type of response we're going to be sending back, in this case the HTTP message handler. I'm making sure it's a task because it's an async request. The method property is send async, and basically once I have that, I specified the parameters that I need, and this type I'm saying return it for any types of request message and any types of cancellation token. Again, all of this is just because we are mimicking a response back to our system. We're not actually doing any calls to our HTTP request or to our HTTP endpoint. So now this is what we have built for our success response. Now let's see what we can do for our not found. And basically this try to mimic any problems with our API. So I can put internal static mock HTTP message handler, and I'm gonna put HTTP is wrong, let's fix it. I'm gonna put here setup return not found, and then here it's gonna be similar. So I'm just gonna copy this and copy this. So instead of retyping it, and here instead of OK, I'm gonna return not found. And the body of the request is gonna be empty. And then this is gonna be the same header. And for this is gonna be also the same. So let's copy this. And here basically we're just saying also it's gonna be a mock handler, protected, going through the same thing as HTTP request message and the cancellation token with the return, and we're returning it. So this is what we need to do in order for us to actually start utilizing or basically mimicking our HTTP handler. We can have this both in the same method. Just for simplicity's sake, we're separating them so we can see the different implementation that we might have there. So once we have done that, what I want to do here is inside my services on the left hand side, I want to start utilizing this. So I'm going to create a new class, and this class I'm going to call it test fan service. So the first one here we currently have is we have tested the controllers and we have tested the implementation of the controllers. Now we're actually testing the service itself that we're using in order for us to connect to our third-party service. So what we're doing here is, let's go back to our diagram. We're actually testing this one here. We're testing the actual service that's connecting the third part. Previously, what we have done is we have actually did the test for our fans controller. Let's make this a bit bigger. So we have done a test for our fans controller. The controller has a different color. Let's give it purple. So the controller tests are completely different from the fan service. So the nice thing about the unit test that we're doing is we're not interlinking those tests together. So here you can see the test for our fans controller that we currently have are only linked. We're trying to mimic this service. We're not actually building this service here. Now we're actually doing tests around this service to make sure that it's actually running as it should be. So here we have our test fan service. So we'll start by creating a fact, and then we'll put public async task, and this task is going to be basically get all fan when on invoked, and we're going to say this is a HTTP get. And then here what we're going to do is we're going to do the same thing. We'll have the arrange, we're going to have the act, and we're going to have the assert. So for the arrange, we're going to start setting up. So first of all, we're going to put var response equal the fans fixtures dot get fans. So here basically we're going to be utilizing the list of fans that we have created previously, and then we're going to put var mock handler, and here we're going to actually mock our HTTP handler, mock HTTP handler, and I'm going to say it's going to be of type fan, and then I'm going to go through the setup request. I'm going to send the response here. Let's fix this. Okay, perfect. And now that I have this, I can have var HTTP client equal new HTTP client, and here we're going to have the mock handler dot object. So basically what we've done here is we have tried to mimic all of this processing, and then we inject it into our HTTP client, so it will actually utilize. So the HTTP client that we're going to be utilizing will think that's actually connecting to a third-party service rather than actually doing the call. And lastly, I have my fan service, var fan service equal new fan service. Let's fix this. And here I have to pass the HTTP client. So now if I go, that's why it's not happy. Oh, it's also expecting the config, so let's add the config as well. So here what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna add a new variable. I'm gonna call this var URL. I'm gonna take the same URL as I have put here inside my app settings. Again, this is all mimicking it. We're not gonna be actually calling it. So if I come here, I'm just gonna update this. And then what I'm gonna do here is, before I do this, I'm gonna put var config equal new options. Actually, without the new, we just do options dot create, and I'm gonna say here new API config, API service config, and then basically I just need to specify the URL equal to the URL that I currently have, and then I need to inject this config here, and that should be it. Perfect. So now my fan service is happy. I am mimicking the URL that we're connecting to. I am mimicking the HTTP client. Now that I have done this, all I need to do is start with the act. So here I need to put await fan service dot get all fans. And now I need to assert. And for me to assert, I'm going to utilize the mock handler dot protected dot verify. And here what I'm going to be verifying is a few items. So first of all, I'm going to verify the send action that we have done. Then I'm going to put it's going to be times exactly once. And async is wrong, so let's fix this. Okay, perfect. So now that I have done this, now I'm going to try to investigate the it expression. And I'm gonna say dot is of type HTTP request message, and then here I'm gonna specify my request. I'm gonna make sure that the method is gonna be equal to get, and let's make this on a new line. It's a bit tricky, but let us make it here on a new line. Yeah. And I'm gonna put and my request dot request actually my request dot request URI dot to string is equal to the URL that I have. Okay, perfect. And now that I have this in place, I think the last thing that I want to actually verify is the cancellation token. So because we have utilized it as it is, so I'm going to put it expression dot is any, and here we're going to put cancellation token. I think that should be it for me trying to get the get request. So if I run this, and we can see here that my services has passed. We can see I got the get all fans invoked successfully. So basically, let's do a recap of what we have done here. We have specified a dummy URL. We have gotten the sample response that we needed, which is a list of fans. We specified a mock handler. We basically utilized the HTTP handler that we have created previously, and then once we have done this, we have basically now utilized our mock handler here in order for us to utilize this HTTP handler. We have then injected it into our HTTP client, so the HTTP client will utilize everything that we have set up inside our mock handler rather than trying to do the actual calls themselves. So once we have done that, the next step is basically creating our configuration in order for us to mimic trying to get the configuration out of the app settings, and then we have injected it into the fan service, because the fan service inside its constructor is actually requesting HTTP client and config. Once that has been done, we initiated the get all fans endpoint, and then we have actually verified that when we initialize this, we're doing and send async. It's only being done once, and then we're doing the expression for the HTTP request message. We're saying that it needs to be a GET, and the URL needs to match the URL. And then once we have done that, that should be it. That we have mean it passed all of the tests that we currently have. So once that we finish this and we make sure that it's working as it should be, the next thing is we want to get the all fans. We want to verify that we're getting actually the list of fans when we are doing all of these calls. So I'm going to copy this and I'm going to put it here, and I'm going to change the name to get all fans when invoked. I'm going to put here get list of fans. And this is also going to be straightforward. So I'm going to keep this, all of this as is. I'm going to keep the fan service here. And then here what I want to do is I'm going to get the results. And for these results, I'm going to update this to reflect it. So this we don't really need. All I'm going to be saying here is result.should and be of type. And then here I'm going to specify the type that it needs to be is a list of users. Actually list of fans. And now if I run this, we can make sure that we got it successful. Okay, perfect. So now that I have created not the response, result. Okay, let's try it again. Okay, perfect, it runs. So now that we have done that, the next one that we want to do is the 404 in case that we don't have anything. So if you remember here inside our HTTP handler, we said that second one in case we didn't find any users on our API, we want to return an empty list of users, because if we take a look here, we said if it's a 400 or not found, we can actually return an empty list of fans. So we want to verify this case right now. And this is going to be also pretty straightforward. Inside my services here, I'm just going to copy all of this and I'm going to add it here. And first of all, we want to update this. So first, I don't really need right now the response, and I don't really need to add it here. And I want to change this to return not found, because basically that's what we want. I'm going to keep my configuration. I'm going to keep the fan results here. I'm going to keep the all fans that I currently have. Everything's going to stay the same. Here I want to say that I'm going to update this. So I'm going to put result dot count that should be, and here instead of type we need to make sure it needs to be of 0. It's going to be an empty list of fans. So now that I want to do this, all I'm going to do is I'm going to execute it, run, and you can see we have a small error. Let's try to fix it. Okay, it says that we need to update the name. I'm gonna call this get all fans. I'm gonna call it return empty list. So now let's run this, and we can see it passed, because basically when we invoke the 400, it means that our service 404, sorry, it realized it was not found and it returned an empty list. Perfect. So this is basically our TDD approach for this sample API that we have built. We have went through the exact same process of what you need to do in order for you to test your controller and your services again. This is not covering all of the different test scenarios that currently exist. This is not covering all of the different implementation that you can actually implement. This is just like an introductory into the world of TDD and how you can actually think about it when you're trying to build your web API and building the test for it. So let's just do a quick recap. So in essence, what we have done is we first started by creating our web API and our unit test project. Inside our web API, what we have done is we have created our new controller called fans controller, which only has one endpoint at the moment. And this endpoint here actually returns a list of fans that we currently have. And then basically from there, what we have done is we start building it up step by step. So we started first by creating our controllers tests. So here we can see within our controllers test, we verified first that it's returning a 200 with an empty response, and then we started building the invocation of the service test and the returning of the list of fan tests, etc., etc. So we took a step gradual approach into for us building the test as well as building the controllers. Once we have that set in place, what we have done is we actually have moved into the service structure. So we actually have created the initial layout of our service, and then we created the initial test for our services, and then we try to mimic the HTTP response because that's the service that we have been relying on. Once we have done that, we actually started creating the different unit tests. We're trying to mimic the successful call and unsuccessful call, and then basically utilizing the different types of response in order for us to make it work. I hope this video was helpful. Please like, share, and subscribe if you did, and please, if you have any question, put them in the comments down below. Thank you very much for watching, and have a great day.